Welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the news report for day 320 of the war in Ukraine. You are listening to The Account. No major event has taken place, so we will not have an individual news segment, just the usual situation inside Ukraine, the occupied territories, Russia and Belarus, and the international developments. Today, though, I have 4 articles I want to point out. I will go over them before the news segment. But for starters, a look at the flashpoints along the front. Kremina. We have reports of Ukrainian forces making slow advances in the forest south of the city and approaching the outskirts of Kremina, marked here with an arrow. In the north, Ukraine repelled attacks around Chernihiv. Soledar. The situation remains foggy and fluid, and no proper assessment is possible. All that can be said is the situation is difficult but stable. We have seen claims that Russia was pushed out from positions around Ochakiv. Russian sources contradict themselves on claims in and around Soledar. For example, some claim Krasna Hora is under Russian control, while others refute it. During the finishing of the video, claims have surfaced that the Ukrainian High Command has told journalists to immediately leave Soledar. It seems Russian forces managed to make some advances, and now the main supply route into Soledar is under Russian fire control, and an encirclement might be imminent. Heavy street battles are raging. The Deputy Minister of Defense, Hanna Maliar, reported that Russia, after an unsuccessful attempt to capture Soledar, retreated, regrouped, recovered losses, transferred additional assault units, changed tactics, and launched another powerful assault. The commander of the ground forces, Colonel General Alexander Siersky, meanwhile stated that Soledar was stormed from different directions by the best units of the Wagner PMC, but without success. According to Serhiy Cherevati, a spokesman for Ukraine's eastern group of forces, fierce battles are raging in Soledar. Over the past 24 hours, Russia shelled the city 106 times, and 22 battles between Russian and Ukrainian forces took place. Bakhmut. Battles are ongoing in and around the city. Russia claims Pitorodne is fully under their control, however, so far no evidence has been provided. The General Staff of Ukraine reported repelled attacks around Pitorodne. We have to wait for more information on the situation. And now for the highlighted articles. We will start with one by the Ukrainska Pravda, titled Bakhmut in Flames: How People Survive in the Heat of the Battle for the City. The battle for the city of Bakhmut has been ongoing since midsummer 2022 and has since become the epicenter of the war. While 90% of the citizens have left, there are still about 8,000 living in the bombed-out town. How do people survive there under literally non-stop shelling? This is the story of 2 civilians that experienced it all, but had to leave behind their hometown and flee from the Russian invaders. Another article was published by CNN. It is titled, "We are the one connection. The postal workers risking their lives to get pensions to Ukraine's elderly." Even though the front lines are close and the daily shelling is posing mortal danger, many older people have remained in towns like Siversk. Their lifeline is the pension they receive from the Ukrainian government. With the money, they can buy what little food is available and survive. Postal workers from Ukropochta still visit these towns regularly to deliver pension checks to the elderly. They are among the unsung heroes. Moving on to the next article by the New York Times. It is titled, "In a Ukraine Workshop, the Quest to Build the Perfect Grenade." Read about how tape, a scale, a 3D printer, and other items are being used by Ukrainian units to perfect their tank killers. The challenge: how to modify a grenade that weighs almost nothing, can be dropped from a drone, and is able to destroy a tank. In other words, how to drop a $200 grenade from a $3,000 drone to destroy a $3 million tank. I enjoyed this article very much. And to finish the highlighted article segment, another publication by the New York Times. This article includes retelling of sexual crimes committed by Russia, which some might find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. It is titled, "Fear Still Remains. Ukraine finds sexual crimes where Russian troops ruled." It is the harrowing tale of Russia's use of forced nudity and rape in the occupied territories to break civilian resistance. Men, women, and children. All types of cases have been found by investigators. The prosecutor's department investigating such crimes so far has opened 154 cases. However, the real number is much, much higher. I firmly believe, as this is one side of the war, it should be reported on, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. However, please only read this article if you are able to stomach the stories. And now for the news segment, starting with the situation inside Ukraine. Yaroslav Yanushevich, head of Kherson Oblast Military Administration, reports that Kherson City has received 7 high-power generators from Germany. They will be used to power critical infrastructure in case of a blackout. 2 women were killed and at least 7 civilians, including a 13-year-old girl, were injured when Russian forces fired missiles at a market in Shevchenkove, Kupiansk district. Russian forces also shelled the city of Ochakiv, Mykolaiv Oblast, wounding at least 10 people, including a 2-year-old child. Vitaly Kim, head of the Mykolaiv Oblast Military Administration, reported the attack on Telegram. After the recording was finished, a new update on the Ochakiv shelling was published, now saying 15 civilians were injured and over 100 houses were damaged. In Chernihiv Oblast, Russia shelled a funeral procession in the village of Remiach. Russian mortar shells fell just 30 meters from the mourners. Luckily, no casualties were reported. Moving on to the latest out of the occupied territories. According to Ivan Fedorov, the mayor of Melitopol, a Russian ammunition depot was destroyed in Melitopol. Explosions were audible for at least 5 hours. The advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, Petro Andriyushchenko, claims that Russia is planning to send 50,000 Russian citizens to Mariupol. As reported by the Luhansk Oblast Military Administration, Russia is conducting raids on businesses and banks in order to seize all Ukrainian currency and remove it from circulation. And now the news updates from Russia and Belarus. New satellite images from Engels-2 show a decrease in combat-ready aircraft stationed at the airbase. Allegedly, only 4 Tu-95 and 2 Tu-160 remain there. Meanwhile, protective barriers have been built along the runway. According to the morning update by the General Staff of Ukraine, Russia has removed more military equipment from long-term storage and is sending it to Belarus. Lieutenant General Alexander Pavliuk, the commander of Kyiv Defense Forces, believes that Russia does not have sufficient capabilities to carry out the necessary maintenance to restore the equipment. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, has said Russian traitors need to be dealt with according to wartime rules and using silent groups. Medvedev did not further explain what exactly he meant, however, it is quite clear what he means. Nikolai Patrushev, the secretary of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, has once again used the Kremlin's propaganda that Russia is not at war with Ukraine. Patrushev further voiced propaganda mantras like Ukrainian traditions are close to the inhabitants of Russia, and the heritage of the Russian people is inseparable from the culture of Ukrainians. And finally, to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. The Secretary General of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, Helga Schmidt, stressed the importance to maintain diplomatic channels with Russia. Therefore, she does not agree with Russia's expulsion from the OSCE. Currently, Poland would be able to transfer only a symbolic number of Leopard tanks to Ukraine, up to 10 units. This was announced by Jakub Kumo, advisor to the President of Poland on foreign policy. He also stated that Poland would participate in sending Leopard tanks to Ukraine only as part of a broader coalition of countries that also have Leopards and are willing to provide them. According to Sky News, discussions on the delivery of the British-made Challenger 2 battle tanks has been taking place for a couple of weeks. The UK might offer around 10 Challenger 2 tanks, which will be enough to equip a squadron. Germany currently has no plan to deliver Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, the country's government spokesman said. The statement comes a day after German Economy Minister Robert Habeck told ARD that the possibility of delivering the tanks cannot be ruled out. The European Court of Human Rights is expected to give its first interstate verdict on the Ukraine and the Netherlands versus Russia case on January 25th. This would be the first decision of any international court to give a legal verdict on what happened in 2014 in the Donbas. United States National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said on January 9th that Iran may be contributing to widespread war crimes by selling lethal drones to Russia for use in its ongoing invasion of Ukraine. And now for our intelligence update segment, starting as usual with the UK Ministry of Defence. Since at least June 2022, Russian aerospace forces have almost certainly used Su-57 Felon to conduct missions against Ukraine. Felon is Russia's most advanced fifth-generation supersonic combat jet, employing stealth technologies and highly advanced avionics. These missions have likely been limited to flying over Russian territory, launching long-range air-to-surface or air-to-air missiles into Ukraine. Recent commercially available imagery shows 5 Felon parked at Achtubinsk Airbase, which hosts the 929th Flight Test Center. As this is the only known Felon base, these aircraft have likely been involved in operations against Ukraine. Russia is highly likely prioritizing avoiding the reputational damage, reduced export prospects, and the compromise of sensitive technology, which would come from any loss of Felon over Ukraine. This is symptomatic of Russia's continued risk-averse approach to employing its air force in the war. Moving on to the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. According to the latest assessment, Russia continues to generate discontent with its people. Especially the false claim of 600 Ukrainian soldiers killed in retaliation in Kramatorsk had several military bloggers voice their discontent. Instead of fabricating a revenge story, the Russian leadership should be held accountable. The bloggers further pointed out that the Russian Ministry of Defense has frequently provided false information. The Institute for the Study of War also mentions Yevgeny Prigozhin's explanation why Russia and Wagner wants to conquer Bakhmut, and writes that these statements are probably an attempt to explain the failures of Wagner and the Russian military in the area and justify the high losses. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. Today, the update is rather short if you ignore the shelling report. According to available information, the so-called Prosecutor's Office of the occupying authorities started work on the so-called nationalization of local enterprises in the settlement of Nizhny Sirogozy, Kherson region on January 9th of this year. The enemy continues to suffer losses. So, in the first week of this year, up to 300 occupiers were brought to the city hospital of Lysychansk, Luhansk region. And that wraps up another one of our news reports. Interested in any of the articles I mentioned? You can find links to them in the description as usual. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. This is the account signing off. Slava Ukraini.